morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Pro Landscaper TV. We are here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. discussing some of the biggest topics within the industry and interviewing some of the biggest names. Pro Landscaper's website will have all the latest information on up-and-coming programmes or a link to catch up on some of our past programmes that you might have missed or you want to go and revisit. We've got some excellent programmes coming up over the next few weeks, with Women in Horticulture next week and an interview with Ken White of Frost's Landscapes and a chat with Rachel and Richard Kay of Green Tech in the following weeks. Again, you can visit the Pro Landscape website for information on them and for registration details as well. But today, though, I'm joined by a wonderful panel to talk about mental health. I'm just going to start by getting you all to quickly introduce yourselves and what you do. Should we start with Helen?
Good morning, I'm from Perennial. I'm the head of casework, so I keep an eye and look after the team who are there to support people, do the helpline and actually do the active, shall we say, frontline work with everybody who works in the horticulture industry.
Brilliant. Kate?
I'm Kate Cooney from Perennial. Good morning, everybody. And I'm the corporate partnership manager, and my role is, or a big chunk of my role is to represent Perennial as the sort of interface, as it were, to the corporate world.
Brilliant. Roger?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Roger. I work for Green Tech, and the role I get paid to do is sales manager, or one of the 3 sales managers within the company. But I'm also one of the 2 mental health first aiders within the business as well. So take a keen interest and active role in supporting the mental health and well-being of staff here.
Brilliant. Angelina?
Oh, hi, everybody. Good morning. Angelina Seren. I'm the Health and Safety, Environment and Quality Director of Ground Control. So landscapers, maintenance, you name it. We serve lots of services across the UK.
Brilliant. And I will just say that unfortunately Owen Byron couldn't be here today, but I am sure that he will get involved with lots of things in the future, as I know he's really keen to. So I'm going to kick off. I'd just like to get a sort of idea of how everyone's doing, how your staff are doing, how people you're talking to are doing, or even how yourselves are doing. Whoever wants to kick it off first. Helen and Kate, you might have a good idea of how the industry's managing.
We've been busy. I think that's the nice polite way of putting it. And I think when we met last year, we said that at the beginning of lockdown, the calls to our helpline increased by over 400%. That was that period of uncertainty when nobody kind of knew what was going to happen. We're not as busy as that now, but it's still busier than normal. A lot more people coming to us for advice and information. The main things that people are coming through for, you know, it's life. It's not being able to pay your bills, your health, mental health particularly, worrying about the future that they can't control. And obviously the helpline, all the employees are working from home. And you can't escape at the moment, can you? Do you know what I mean? You can't escape. You can't go to the gym, you can't go out to the restaurant and meet friends and just relax. So it's making that conscious effort of thinking, how can the team relax? How can people de-stress? How can people switch off? Because that ability to what you'd normally do isn't there at the minute. Mind you, everybody seems to be out walking or running or on the bike or walking dogs until the dogs don't want to go out anymore. But that's what we've been looking at and being very proactive and making sure the team do take an active break. No matter how busy you are, you need to take a break. You need to take some time out.
Kate, have you got anything to add to that?
Yes, I think in my role, I talk to companies all day, and the feelings are very, very mixed. I remember I've been working very closely with Helen during these challenging times, and I remember Helen saying, when it was this 400% increase, which was massive, and you know, I think the word unprecedented was overused, but it's the only word that we can just use to describe the situation. And it went quite quiet, or relatively quiet. It calmed down, and I said to Helen, why is that? I thought it would get busier and busier. And she said, the tide's gone out, we're waiting for the next crash to come in. And that's the feeling. Initially, I think it was uncertainty that people were facing. Now that has left a lot of problems that people weren't anticipating. People that were working from home, they adapted to working from home. And now they're a bit worried about going back into the offices and their workplaces, and employers, what's the right thing to do? What's the safe thing to do? So there's all those questions that are being unanswered. I remember at Futurescape, I watched the great John Melmo talk, and it was a conversation. It was a discussion about, life after COVID. And John's quote, and it's really stayed with me, is, there's no after COVID, it's here for good now. And it's how we work with that and what do we do sort of foot forward. So I think things are definitely more positive because people can see a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's how we get from that. And those are things that are being asked for us all the time.
Roger and Angelina, have you had concerns from your staff?
Yes.
Go on, Angelina.
No, you go first, Roger.
Well, no, I was just I think this situation has been very, very different for everybody. And just picking up on a couple of points that Helen and Kate mentioned there, which is very interesting. As a company, we've been quite fortunate in the sense that we haven't been affected in the same way that a lot of other ones have. We've been incredibly busy, particularly coming through over the winter period. We were on the back of the busiest trading year we've ever had. So if you take COVID away from that, then actually from a purely economical point of view, we've come through it very, very well. However, what that has done is it's had a knock-on effect to the other things that would happen. Everyone's tired, everyone needs a break, everybody needs a way of actually escaping from how busy we are, and nobody can do that. People can't go to bars, people can't go to restaurants, people can't go on holiday and cope with the stresses that we have in the same way that we normally would. So what Helen mentioned earlier on is absolutely vital. And I think what Kate mentioned there about the fact that everyone's looking forward to this idea of when COVID finishes. And we were having that conversation this morning that it's going to be here forever. It's just a question of how we actually manage that and how we come to terms and deal with that. So from our point of view, we've tried very hard to make sure that we're looking after staff in a different way. Not so much changing potential policies within the business, but actually thinking about our attitude to what people do and how they do it, and making sure that we're looking after people, giving people the opportunity to do things slightly differently than they normally would, to help them deal with everything that's happening on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, definitely very interesting times and real challenges for us all in terms of how we deal with it and how that happens, not just now, but moving forward as well.
Hiya. So I think I pretty much gave you a good overview on our last session around what we did for our teams and all of our people across the business. And it was pretty much that nobody was left behind, that we tried to give every incentive out there, from your Babylon access to your online GPs, to your car maps, to, sending hampers and things like that, to feel that team effect. We had open forums, online catch-up socials and things like that. And I think everybody's kind of got a bit tired of that over the years. I think speaking to lots of different friends, we're zoomed out, so we're on Zoom all day, and then we then don't even want to catch up with our friends at the end of the day. And we've recognised that, we've had to adapt the way that we're working and the way that we used to work. We were predominantly either very operational or office based. So we have a flexible working policy that's going to be released shortly. And I think that's actually been a breath of fresh air for some of our mothers returning to work, those with children, or anybody that potentially has got some needs in their life. So I think that's been a real positive for some people, because it's quite easy to get caught up in the negative stance that COVID's brought, and I totally get that. It's been horrific for everybody involved. I mean, the other area that we're trying to do is now look forward. So we've had some real big as a nation, we've had a lot of up and downs. Who could have anticipated 3 lockdowns and everything that we went through, and go out, don't go out, all that jazz. So I think in terms of where we're going, we are looking to the future. Really delighted to hear that the vaccination programme is going well by the NHS, and the frontline workers are still and will always be our heroes. We want to look at, right, we will get back to work at some point in our offices. We are still operating out there in the environment. So we predominantly, as I was saying, sort of maintenance-led organisation. So we're outdoors. But those offices, we want to have a look at and make them more inviting. So we're having a few refurbs at the moment, and that's to change the dynamics and the way that we were working. And I think it brings us back to a new, fresh sense of an era or new way of resetting. And with that, there are going to be people that are going to struggle going back to work. So while we're adopting the flexible working policy with that and making the environment more inviting, we've also identified and we've already got on board back to work counsellors. So there are people that are struggling not only with being at home, who are very social. There are people who have lost people through COVID and non-COVID related situations, stresses and strains. Domestic violence cases have risen. Children have suffered, as we know, you know, across the UK with the lunch box scenario, the feeding at school, at school meals. So there's a lot of other things that have made people change their mindset. And it's not, you know, we've all become hermits. You know, we've not been inclusive. So from our perspective, we want to make sure that we've got the right team surrounding our people to get them back into work if they have any struggles. Social anxiety is a thing, you know, really is. So I'm kind of looking today at the future and what we are doing and where we're going to go. And that said, we're going to expand on the mental health first aiders as well, so their roles, responsibilities, and again start looking at them nationally as opposed to sort of more of a head office sort of heavy function. Thanks.
Thank you, Angelina. Roger, is there anything that Green Tech have put in place that they didn't have before over the last year to support people further through all of this?
Yeah. Absolutely. And as I say, I think it's as much about changing attitudes as it is about actually changing your environment, because our environment has changed through the fact it's had to do. We used to have a breakout room where we had table tennis and darts and a pool table where people could go during the day and on lunch breaks and chill out and relax and unwind. And we've been quite fortunate in that we've managed to keep most of the people within the office space. But in order to do that, we've had to make a lot of changes to the office to make it COVID secure. So things like the breakout room has gone, and that's now the marketing and specifier office, because we've had to utilize the space to spread people around. Everybody's workstation has moved, so they're working in smaller groups. We have big boards, I could turn the camera around and show you, but it probably wouldn't work very well. Big boards around all the workspaces to protect people as well, which actually makes you feel a lot more enclosed. So we've had this situation where we've had to very much change the working environment that we've got. So we're encouraging people to go outside and take breaks a little bit more often. Whereas before you'd expect people to be at the desk doing the work and doing all the things that you'd expect them to do. If people feel like they need to get outside and just have 10 minutes of fresh air, then that's fine. Just do what you need to do. It doesn't have to be a cigarette break, as a lot of people use it for, but actually in terms of just being able to get some fresh air, get your headspace different and move away from it. I think also the fact that we've been successful in keeping as many people in the office as we can has helped, because it actually means that we're all getting a little bit more social interaction than we normally would. It's not always easy to listen to people talking when you're behind face masks. I've got mine here. I do have to wear it when I'm walking around the office. But it does mean that we've been able to interact, and we are having the banter of whose teams won or lost at the weekend, or whether anybody watched the new series of Line of Duty on Sunday, and all of those things that you'd normally have that we do take for granted. We really do take those sort of things for granted. But actually, when you're working from home, which I have done on a couple of days, and it's just your partner or the kids, and it's a very, very different environment. So it's been as much about changing our attitude to what people do and how we interact with people, because of the fact we've been forced to change the physical space people are working in.
So, Helen and Kate, what are some of the biggest fears that you're hearing from people or companies as we move out of lockdown and the restrictions ease? And what are some of the things that companies can do to support their staff through this? Because it is a huge transition. As much as we're so excited to get back to normal life, it's a massive, it can be very anxiety inducing, very stress inducing. So what are some of the things that you're hearing?
It has gradually changed over the year. So last March, April, May was very different from August, September, October, which was very different from November, December. Going forward from January, I think this lockdown has been much more difficult for a lot of people. I think it's the lack of daylight, but also more things have just got exacerbated over a year. So we've had a lot more people coming to us because they've been worried about paying their bills. And that can be not that they're not working, but actually that for the self-employed, quite a few of them have had a reduced income because people are at home themselves and doing their own gardening. We've seen that flourish, haven't we? Of everybody can go to the garden centre there, so they're doing well, let's be honest. But it has had a knock-on effect with some of the self-employed, especially the garden maintenance. And of course, their family, even though they may be out, their families are at home, the children are at home, the heating's on more, the electric's on more, and we're all eating more. I know I certainly am, but let's be honest, that is what's happening. So everybody's bills are more, but in a lot of cases, their actual income is down. Not for everybody. I mean, let's be honest, some people who've carried on working and earning the same have actually got some savings because they haven't been going out. But for the people who are coming to us, they could manage for so long, but now they're worried about the bills because the gas has gone up, the electric's gone up. If they're on a water meter, their water has gone up because they're in all the time, or the whole family's in all the time where they wouldn't have been. Some things are just costing more. So we have got that, but the main one, the highest percentage has changed going from this year. At the end of last year, it was very much redundancies, job insecurity. We still got that, but that has reduced slightly. Note the word slightly. But what has come to the fore is mental health and physical health. I think for some people with mental health, this is a new thing because of lockdown. Some people had it previously, but it's been exacerbated. And it's all these worries, all the concerns, which on an individual level, you might be able to cope with. But when you've got lots of things, it's like a jigsaw, isn't it? If you've got one piece of a jigsaw that's bothering you, you know what, you can live with it on a day-to-day basis. But if you have lots of things that are causing you anxiety and stress and you're worried about it, it just becomes exacerbating. You get to that point of, this is all getting too much now. We've had, people who might have had that with their physical health, that niggle, I don't know, they've pulled something, they've done something, but they've carried on working, especially if they're self-employed or they're employed, because they don't want to call in sick. They don't want to take time off because they're worried, will I lose that customer if they're self-employed? Or if there's been even any mention of any job insecurity or reduction in hours, they don't want to take that time off because they don't want to stand up above anybody else. So there's that as well, which I'm not saying it's going to lead to a long-term health condition, but that's what we're getting through for our physio service. So it's quite interesting, is probably completely the wrong word to use, but people are concerned about things on a much deeper level than perhaps employers may realise. So you may have had no redundancies, you may have had to put nobody on furlough, or if you did, it might have been because they've requested it, because of care and responsibilities. But that then, or they may hear from other employees, other firms that, they're laying theirs off, he's not getting as much, and that it sort of spreads out. If there's a flutter, it spreads out like a ripple in a pond. So it might not directly affect you at Green Tech, and by the sounds of it, you've had a fantastic last 12 months. But somebody who works for you may have heard that somebody else isn't taking people on where they would have done, or they furloughed. And it's that what if, because we're not going to the cinema, we're sat at home all waiting for the line of duty to come on, and your brain works overtime. People aren't sleeping well. The use of I think I mentioned it last time, our mental health wellbeing together all, people going in and getting information on how to sleep better, that's really been used so much. You can imagine, can't you? you wake up in the middle of the night and they're worrying about things that happen to somebody else, that it might happen to them.
Yeah, I would echo that in the companies that I speak to. And one of the things that, and it's the companies I speak to, I'm fortunate enough to have a big network of friends. It's small things get exacerbated. So what wasn't a problem suddenly becomes this massive, drama, because there's no escapes and outlets that you would normally have of going down the pub with your friends or whatever, and the whole cooped up thing. One of the positive sides, and I am a natural optimist, is that for Perennial, our fundraising streams have been hit badly. We've not been able to have the events that we have, the sponsored things. There's a world of difference of going to an awards ceremony and people being there, and the income you might raise from that, from sort of, online things. But one of the really big pluses is that lots and lots of organisations have got behind us and see the advantage of working collaboratively with us. And these are some fabulous employers, and they use us not as a compensate for what they're not providing, but as a bolt-on. And they see this whole thing, and again, I've spoken about this before, this whole relationship of, we've got a joint duty of care. You guys employ your staff and you're responsible for them while they're working for you. We are responsible for their families, and we'll be responsible for them, into retirement and moving on. And companies, a lot of organisations have come to realise that and have been working. It's been a privilege to work with them, hasn't it, Helen? And
absolutely, yeah.
Speaking to the HR director of an organisation that is probably one of the biggest employers of horticulturalists in this country, and we've done a piece of work with them, and they were saying, it's just brilliant. We can put in everything that we've got in place, but we know you're there as the catch net, that helplines that organisations employ are totally confidential, but employees don't necessarily believe that. And it's that comfort of being able to talk to somebody that is totally independent of them. And the fact that we've been endorsed by that company, there's a partnership that's gone forward. I mean, our service is free and confidential for anybody that works in the industry. But when we're working in partnership with organisations, it can be very, very powerful and helpful. And that's what we want to do, help the individuals that work within our fabulous industry.
And I think one of the key things is where Kate has said there is that when we've worked with employers on that way, is that anonymity for their employees.
Yeah.
So they will go to things about maybe flexible working that seems, because maybe their partner's ill or something like that, or the child, but particularly about stress and anxiety, they won't particularly open up, even to mental health first aiders, or they may do it on a much lower level and not actually express everything. So we do notice every time we've done some of these seminars, the uplift in people who come to us for support, the people who use the online wellbeing, it just goes up by quite a significant percent.
Thank you, Pro Landscaper.
Yeah. So, do you know what? I think for the mental health being tool, they don't have to come through the helpline. They do sometimes, because we can help with what they're worried about, but they can go on. It's totally anonymous. Nobody knows. We don't know who they are. But the point is that help is there, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what it's all about.
Yeah, you're doing fantastic work. As you say, it is a partnership. So what are some things that companies can do day to day? And I'll open it up to Angelina and Roger as well. I'm sure you've got some great advice to support their staff as these restrictions ease. Just day to day, what can employees do?
I think going forward, let's be honest, let's hope, we're all hoping we're coming out of lockdown, that these dates aren't going to change. They might do a bit, but, you know, hopefully with the vaccination coming through, as Angelina mentioned, is that we've got to take into account that not everybody is going to be excited about going back into the work office, especially if they have been working at home continually. For some people, that's going to be a big step. I think, especially those who I'm sure you'll have on record, you know, those who've been shielding. That's probably why they've been working from home. But for them, that's going to be even more so about coming back into the office, because they will have spent long periods of time literally not coming out of their home, or being very cautious coming out of their home, avoiding people. So that's sort of a double concern coming back into the office space or traveling to meetings, because they physically have not been doing that. You feel very safe sat in your back bedroom or in your living room or in the kitchen doing it by Teams or Zoom, but going back into work when you've also been shielding, or you've been caring for somebody who's shielding, so you think about it a bit more. I think that's something really key for people to think about. Not, they may be excited to see you all, I'm sure they will be, but the thought of going in every day, that after a whole year, that's for some people, that's going to be quite scary. That they could be quite anxious about that, and I think that really is something to think about and take into account.
I think another sort of hidden thing that people aren't necessarily aware about, think about as individual employees, is that although some have been furloughed and that there's a drop in their income in a lot of cases, things like they've saved on childcare costs. It might be a mare with the kids running around, but nonetheless they've not had to pay for that after school club and things like that, as well as things like travel, whether it be public transport or petrol costs. You know, they've been making those savings. Finance is a very complex, different thing, but that's something that a few sort of people have said to me, you know, well, I've not had to pay for after school club, you know, extra childcare clubs and holiday clubs and things like that. So they're all sort of financial considerations that people are thinking, that saved me X amount and now I'm going to have to pay for this. And it's one of those things that it's not, you know, your place of work is your place of work unless your contract's actually changed. But it's another issue and a stress factor as well. You know, there's a finance side, but we know that so much stress and mental ill health is related to sort of finances. And I think that will be a big issue for a lot of people or a lot of households.
Yeah, I think that's something which is quite interesting from an employer's point of view, and the way we have to manage our business now is to understand and reflect that it is a very different environment that we're talking about. Pre-COVID, we would have talks about mental health, raising awareness, and the whole idea that it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And that's still very, very relevant and will continue to be so. But coming out of lockdown and the world will change. As we mentioned earlier on, it's not about waiting till COVID's over. It's about learning to adapt and live with the way the world will be different as we move forward. So those stresses and those pressures and those fears for everybody can be very different. And I think it's important that we all recognize that that can be the case. We're still going to have situations where people who have got children, classes may have to isolate for a week because they've had a positive case. And all of a sudden we're out of lockdown, everyone's going back into the office, everyone's going about their business, and we have this idea that everything's back to normal. But we were still going to have to adapt. And from an employer's point of view, I think it's important to understand that everybody is different. Everyone may have different problems, everyone may have different requirements, and to be as flexible and understanding as we possibly can with that, and not try and make it a one size fits all across everybody.
I was just going to say, if I stick to my discipline being HSQE and actually all of the wonderful landscapers that are watching today, we're just about to go into a new season. So there's big change and the world is still continuing to move on. And with that comes risk. So my stance on this, and this relates quite closely with mental health and well-being, you know, people that have been on furlough, perhaps sites that have been put on hold for many of you guys out there, whether that's hospitality sites, or if it's the case that they've just decided to shut down their sites while the offices are closed. We're going to go into doing some work that can be dangerous at times. Trees are still growing, we still need to climb, and so much emphasis has been placed on COVID controls, restrictions, etc., that our mental mind, the ability to kind of assess risk almost that's in front of us, is almost disappearing because we're putting COVID at the forefront of this. So it's really important that if we have a look at the mental health and well-being aspect, whether that's can't sleep or stressed or anything like that, could have a significant impact in terms of the way in which people are working safely. And that really concerns me. So we really do need to be focused and keeping our eyes and ears to the ground. And with that, we have a team of SLT members across the business within ground control, and we are just about to engage with them all, deliver some training to deliver engagement visits at site level. So while the world returns, it's about getting visibility from management who believe in all of our values, and that includes the health and safety, the well-being, environmental matters, because that's what we do, right? We work within the environment, and certainly quality, and that comes down to providing a decent piece of work, but also delivering to the specification. And we're going into great growing season, it's going to go crazy. So we're out there and we're going to be championing, you know, being the eyes and ears. We're going to engage in conversations. It's not about doing an inspection on a team or going out there. It's actually about having a one-on-one conversation, getting to know who Bob is, knowing a bit about him, perhaps how COVID's had an impact on him, his family, his life, a bit about where we're going. So we're looking at total well-being of all of our employees. That's so important. We're not just focusing on one element. Occupational health is also an issue. So some people have some ailments that have actually been missed due to lack of appointments. So that's the other thing that we need to be really mindful of, is that people could be poorly and not address that at this time because they can't get an appointment. So it's about us taking all of that into consideration, feeding that through and looking at ways in which we can continually develop the business, or perhaps put some actions in or steps for people that we might not even realize. I think sometimes we, you know, you sit in your own bubble and you actually think, oh, okay, you know, this is how it's all going to work out there and at site level. And actually it's a very different case. Welfare facilities are still not the same. You can't just go and make a cup of tea in your shared facilities for some of these cabins, because a lot of these kettles and toasters and microwaves have been removed for cross-contamination purposes. So it really has had a massive impact. And again, if you don't eat on time, that can affect your concentration levels, and then you're going to climb up in a tree or operate, you know, a very dangerous mower, or you turn a machine over. So it's really important, you know, the reason why I'm here is just to share the HSQE element of that. It's really important.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. And I guess something every company can do, no matter what size, is, like you mentioned, get to know your employees, what they've been through, what their journey has been through the last year, and then how you can support them through it. Yeah, brilliant. Obviously, it's undeniably been an incredibly tough year for mental health, but I was interested to find out if any of you think that there's some lessons we've learned over this past year that are actually going to benefit our mental health. As I personally think that I've learned to have a bit better life-work balance and step away from work, and really step away from work a bit more. Is there anything else you guys think that we've learned this past year?
Just to jump in again there, outdoor space is so important. We live and breathe it, and again, it's our bread and butter. All these people on the call today, we know that open space is so important. I don't think that we necessarily appreciated what we had. I also think sometimes people with gardens and things like that take that for granted. There are a lot of people in apartments and God knows what that have literally been stuck in a situation where they have nowhere to go. So I think connecting back to nature has been really important. Families who have had new babies and fathers have had experiences on both levels when speaking to new fathers and mothers within the organisation. So some of those chaps have had a really nice experience because they have missed out on these opportunities before. So they'd have their 2 weeks paternity or whatever it is, and then back to work, and mum's there. And it's been nice to see people share those experiences. On the other hand, when you are trying to function in a house full of children, it can be quite challenging, and a new baby on top of that. So that's been really interesting as well. But that said, the weather was pretty good for some people last year who got to experience it all. And were able to connect back and take the kids out and learn. You know, there were lots of programs run by National Trust, you know, go and find insects and things like that. So it was quite educational. So I think that's had a real positive spin there. I also think that we've had the ability to understand and value each other more. Just why it's so important for us all to, we're all, I sort of call it the circle of life, but we all, every department, every function in a business, you know, from the guys out there on the ground up to the business development team that are trying to sell the contracts, that we all realise and value each other. Being available, we've been a lot more available than we ever have. So where you'd normally be in the car and you don't want to take calls and bits and bobs, you're literally on a screen. There's no getting away from that at the moment. So, but it's also been useful to connect people and pick up the speed of being able to work and get some real outputs, you know, get things done sort of thing. That said, it can be a bit overwhelming for others who have then found themselves glued to the screen. So I get where you're coming from, Rachel. You found that real balance. Some people that I've spoken to have really struggled with that. One, because morally they feel that they want to get something done. They haven't maybe got anything else to do. There are a lot of single people out there as well at the moment. We forget that their lives have stopped. They haven't got a family around them. They may be alone. So that's had an impact on them and their mental health. So I think there's an awful lot of things that we need to learn, but I would say the biggest piece is to be kind to yourself and to other people.
Definitely, 100%. Has anybody else got anything to add?
I would say it has enabled everybody to probably realise the things that you've always taken for granted, as your family, who you used to see all the time, never thought anything of it, you'd nip in and all of a sudden you can't. I think people have started to appreciate that so much more. I think being outside, people have definitely, when we were told we could have an hour, do you remember? We were told we could have an hour, all of a sudden everybody's out for an hour who never would have gone out for an hour previously. So it would be really good to see if that did actually continue. Once the world opens back up again, if people do take advantage of the outside and the green spaces and the parks, you never know, that might have a knock-on effect to people appreciating the people who keep them beautiful. That would be the real positive, wouldn't it? But I think is that people have reflected somewhat of what they took for granted and probably will not take it for granted again, because once it's taken away, it's a real shock, isn't it?
Yeah, I would agree with what Helen and Angelina have said there. I think it's just been obviously a very, very difficult year for everybody. I don't think anyone can come out of it feeling they're in a better place than they were 12 months ago. But quite a few people are in a different place. And whilst there are a lot of people who are struggling, it has given everyone the opportunity to reflect on a lot of things. I, for one, know my local area much, much better than I ever did before. You know, if we had a spare weekend or a spare day, we'd be travelling off here or travelling off there and disappearing as far as we could away from home. We've got some wonderful places near where we live, so we know our home, we know our community, we know where we are much better than we did before. We've had to adapt and we've had to be different and we've had to do things differently. And I think, personally speaking, we will live a slightly different life moving forward than we did. Not all of it will be bad. You know, obviously there's the use of technology has been great over the last year in terms of helping people stay connected and helping people actually. I probably will speak to my parents more moving forward than I did before, because I can hopefully visit them when I can visit them. But we have Zoom chats most weekends, which we never did before. So it doesn't replace what we did, but it means that we can now actually take the best things of what's happened, add them to the freedom we hope we're going to get in a few weeks, and moving on from there, and use it as an opportunity to improve in as many ways as we can.
In terms of, sorry, I was just going to say, sorry, go on, Kate.
No.
In terms of economy as well, is going to the local butcher, going to the local super, you know, that for me, there's a sense of almost really honouring where it's possible. Sometimes it's a bit pricey, I get that, but trying to build back better includes looking at, you know, we're doing holidays at home. That's fantastic. We're, you know, shopping and getting our groceries. I just think it's, for me, life-changing, because I was all about convenience and speed, and now I'm taking a moment to think, where's this come from? Who can this help? Who am I helping by going through this transaction? So I think that's really great. Sorry about that, Kate.
I don't know. Well, actually, that sort of echoes nicely, Angelina, because it has been a terrible, difficult time. There's no getting away from that. However, my glass will always remain half full. And I think there are some really, really important messages. I think, echoing from what Roger said in terms of value of talking, that there have been longer conversations and more meaningful conversations, because people aren't racing around, whether that's your family group, that's whether it's on a professional basis, and that has come. I think one of the big pluses, there's still a stigma attached to it, but our understanding of the importance of mental as well as physical health it's okay to talk, and it's okay to ask if somebody's okay, and ask them again if they're okay. And so the awareness has been raised. And finally, echoing from what Angelina said about, there's this, and I was talking earlier about, you know, there have been a lot more collaborations going on, and whether that's collaborations with business to business, organisations engaging with us more, which has certainly happened, and also local community, you know, with your local communities. Those have to be positive things, and it's our responsibility to make sure they continue as well. I'm always fearful of, you know, we clap the nurses, but we don't give them any pay rises. It's kind of taking all the positives forward, and remembering this time, and not just consigning it to sort of history.
Yeah, I think it has forced us to slow down a little bit and really think about what's important, and I think it's given us quite a lot of breathing space to sort of explore our mental health and what we need to have a healthy mental health. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to my panelists for joining me. You've been fantastic, and thank you to everyone who's watched. Don't forget to tune in next week for Women in Horticulture, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.